wait a second, you're not teaching us how to sell. You're teaching us how to fall in love with our customer. And I was like, yes.
Wow.
And when you fall in love, they love
Wow.
you back.
What is up, Apex Chasers? Welcome to another episode of the Disruptor podcast, which for now is going to be a segment underneath of the Apex podcast. But if you remember, we've got Mr. Disruptor himself, John Kundtz, right to this direction over here. I'm starting to get better at that. One of these days, I'm going to actually remember which side to point to. But today we have a guest that John handpicked himself. And I'm super excited to have her on, but I would like to allow John the privilege of introducing who we're going to be talking to today.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, I'm actually really excited as well. This is segment number 7 of the Disruptor. And today we have a really cool person, Ashley Welch. She is the co-founder of Somersault Innovation and the co-author of Naked Sales, How Design Thinking Reveals Customer Motives and Drives Revenue. And as Jan mentioned, I sort of handpicked Ashley to come on the show, and I wanted to start by just sort of explaining why with a little story. So as many of you know, back in 2015, the company I work with, we went out and acquired a company based in Austin. It was a technology services company selling software as a service platform. It was really cool. It was really disruptive. It was really innovative. The net of it was we went out to sell it initially. My job, after we made the acquisition, my job was to enable our global sales teams to basically put this technology and services into their portfolio. And we got a lot of initial excitement and a lot of initial meetings. Some of that was probably because we had this little shiny new box to go tell people. We got a number of second meetings. And then all of a sudden, our sales and our processes sort of just grinded to a halt, and we couldn't figure it out. Net, flew down to Austin, Texas, met with a bunch of distinguished engineers and a couple of other really smart people, way smarter than me, and we came up with this idea of taking design thinking techniques and trying to apply them to our sales process. So we did that for about a year, ran about 20 workshops, and it was starting to pay off. And so I'm like, wow, wonder if anybody else is doing this. And as a result, I went to look through the internet and stuff and found that very few people were doing this. But the one that was Ashley. So I'd like to bring Ashley in and talk about her journey and again, her passion of design thinking and sales. You know, I'm so happy to have you on the show because it's something Jan and I have been discussing for a while now. And again, I'm just sort of curious about your story. You heard my sort of rambling story, but I'm curious about your story behind Somersault Innovation and sort of what prompted you and your co-founder with this idea of combining sales and design thinking.
Yeah, all right. Well, first of all, I want to say you're the unicorn. You're like the third person in the world who's ever Googled design thinking and sales. So thank you. We're looking for more unicorns. So what inspired us? Well, I've been in sales for over 25 years, and I had worked for another company selling for many, many years, and had then been sort of introduced to the world of design thinking, just like you, like all of a sudden saw the power of this methodology to transform how people were solving problems. Essentially, that's what it's used for most of the time. And it's a creative, fun process. And my current business partner, Justin, was also working at the firm, and together we said, well, what if we left, started our own firm, and just did design thinking? And we became teachers and coaches of this methodology because we love it. So we did. We started Somersault. And then it was pretty quickly after starting the firm that we said, wait a second, there's all this synergy between the world of design thinking, really the tools, mindsets, different processes, and the world of sales. I think because I had a sales background, I thought, well, the characteristics of the best designer are the same characteristics of the best seller. Like they're rabidly curious, they're insight hunters, they look to co-create with their clients, and they are constantly customer-centric. so we sort of played with this notion, this hypothesis we had that if we gave some of the tools from the world of design, not all of them, but some of them, we handpicked the best tools that would help sellers in 3 spaces: discovery, insight, and acceleration. What would happen? And our belief was it would transform how they sold, but we didn't know. So we started playing with this notion at Salesforce, and I can tell you many of the stories, but all of a sudden it was like this magic pixie dust we were sprinkling on these sellers, and it was transforming how they sold. And importantly to sales, it was really increasing revenue and pipeline.
I'm going to pop in like right on that note right there. Like you said, like sprinkling pixie dust. For everybody that's listening that is maybe from Ashley's camp, the voice that you're hearing right now is Jan Almasy. So me and John kind of connected about a year ago, really as I was trying to figure out how to use design thinking processes in marketing. And it started off with a physical building. John basically was like, that's a dumb idea. You should not have a physical building. You should go into services. And that was like the best thing that ever happened to us. Now, this pixie dust, I think when you're dealing with a group that has to interact with humans on a daily basis, and that's like their number one goal is to not sell product, but form relationships that end up selling product. It's like adding one extra step in the middle. Because I've talked to plenty of people and marketers too. It's why I'm so intrigued as to where the conversation is going to go on the sales side. Because on the marketing side, what we're really pushing for is using this design thinking as a way to say, stop trying to market directly, a service. Stop trying to market, something that you're trying to sell. And actually market the relationship that you're trying to form with the end user and study the end user in order to understand what that messaging needs to be. Build those personas, build those empathy maps, create a buyer's journey, and use those tools inside of marketing, because marketing and sales are really hand in hand at this point. And the way that technology has boomed in the last decade, if you're not kind of proficient in both, like being a good seller is being a good marketer, and being a good marketer is being a good seller at this point. And that pixie dust just allows people to rise over into the next, echelon, which is amazing.
I agree.
So to be fair, Jan, I don't think I told you your idea was bad. I think what I did was we sat down in a workshop with one of the economic development and entrepreneurial organizations here in Cleveland, and we actually did an empathy map of Jan's team and his client. And once we started digging into how they feel, what they say, what they do, and what they're thinking, classic, empathy mapping from design thinking, I think that's, to be honest, that's when the light bulb went off in Jan's head that maybe the track he was going down was maybe better suited by addressing the needs and sort of the uncovered needs that he didn't really know existed, and therefore sort of pivoted.
And address those. I will say something interesting that just came up. I got a text this morning about we worked with a team at a big tech research company, and we have been doing our process is called Sell by Design, and we had taught them these things. And one of the sellers that we had worked with, who had been very successful, wrote us and said, "Hey, where are you guys? You guys aren't in the system, and we're losing our customer centricity. We're doing all these things about personas, but that's marketing. That's not about how we sell." And what I think she was saying in that is, yes, we can do these empathy maps, we can do these personas so that we understand who our end user is, or who we think our end user is, and what we think they care about. But in the sales process, we also have to engage face to face. And it's the level of curiosity that in large part that's going to distinguish us as a seller in a different way. And it's our ability to ask questions that aren't just about the solutions that we're trying to sell, but really trying to open up the aperture greater in terms of, like, tell me all about, Jan, your business and what you care about. And let me go there and really sink myself in. That's beyond, I think, or in addition to the empathy map and the personas that I've built. I have to test my assumptions with you.
I love the fact that you use the word aperture. right there, because an aperture is something that controls a level of light.
Yeah.
It's not like a door that is just like a barrier between two rooms. It's not, you could have used a window right there, which is kind of, but an aperture specifically allows more light to come in to get a clearer picture.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. That is so cool.
Well, you have a great quote, and you've sort of addressed it, but I want to hit on it in your book, called "Design Thinking Tools in the Hands of Sales Professionals is like putting Miracle Grow on plants."
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens. And, in our world, we weren't actually working with the salespeople per se. We were indirectly, but we went right out to the clients and got them in a room and started taking them through a process, essentially having them co-create the vision and the solution. So as they move forward, because as you know, in world of transformation or innovation, or, I always love it when the client says, well, where have you done this before? And we'll go, well, if we had done this a bunch of times before, it wouldn't be innovative anymore, right? The reason you're innovating is so you can do something that nobody else is doing. And so that helps the client sort of realize that, there is a big picture vision, but also what we were trying to do is get them to look at how to take little baby small steps. And so a lot of what I've discovered and is not so much it's actually the prioritization of all of these things. So, right, 'cause at least what I found was obviously nobody can do everything. There's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough people. As we used to say, time, people, and money, pick two, or whatever that saying from the sales site. And so we were able to sort of put things down in a agile sort of approach, based on the prioritization, based on their user-centric needs. And it was sort of a really cool way for the client to start to sort of see the light, if you will. But what I really sort of like about what you've done is you've actually taken into the salespeople themselves. I think both are important. And so that, to me, I think that epiphany when the salespeople, Jan, you have a saying, it's about going fast.
Smooth, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's something that they teach military members when we're learning shooting drills. And so if you think about moving quickly, your body tends to get nervous. And so if you think about moving quickly, when you go to draw the pistol or you go to hold the rifle up, you tend to be a little bit more shaky because your adrenaline starts running. It's harder to keep your heart rate down. But if slow is smooth and smooth is fast, so you take everything and you rehearse it so many times that it just becomes muscle memory. And at that point, you can move extremely slowly, but if you're accurate, it's actually better in the long run. You waste less ammo. You're able to take out more. At that time, you're trying to take out enemy troops or whatever you're trying to teach you to do. But in the sales world and in the marketing world, at least in my side, I use that analogy a lot when I'm thinking of structuring people's campaigns or getting to know the client. Like, you don't need to try to rush through that discovery phase. That discovery phase is actually probably the most important. And the other half that I use outside of that slow is smooth is fast is, rather than trying to build a foundation, take it one step further and try to find high quality concrete first. If you can find high quality concrete, then you'll have a high quality foundation. And this is where your process, I think, is really helping people find that concrete.
Exactly. Start. And I think find it in the way you said, John, like this co-creative stance, find it like in relationship with the client, figure out the priorities that they care about, not what you care about. And through that, you're going to grow something much bigger for both of you and add greater value.
I agree 1,000%. I mean, my biggest frustration right now with most of the salespeople I work with is they want to go fast. And they don't want to go smooth, right? They don't want to take a step back and do the work. I mean, I always say we as salespeople are relatively lazy. We like to get from point A to point B as fast as we can, because the faster we do it, in theory, the more stuff we sell. But at the same time, I see this churn, and then you come off as just somebody pushing stuff, and you have no idea whether or not they even, client says, I'm not even sure I need this stuff. And I've been really trying to get this idea of going back, understanding, the desirability by the client, our technical feasibility to deliver it, and then the viability of the solution.
Pull this off.
And those three things are sort of the pillars of design thinking.
Exactly. I think the thing I think is interesting about sales and how we can all empathize with sales, I mean, I'm in sales, is this idea that all of what we're talking about sounds good, right? And it sounds very logical and wonderful. And yet there is real incredible pressure in sales, right? There's, depending on what type of company you're in, there could be public pressure, stockholder or shareholder pressure. You get paid when you sell. And I really think like money corrupts how we think. And so when you have the pressure of sales and then the promise of pay, it does not bring out the best in us, right? And so it's that context that we're trying to resist with these tools that I think actually have become quite helpful, because once you start to use these tools and they're very concrete and they do give you sort of a recipe for how to engage, you can resist the pressure and the promise of pay in a way that actually gets you more, because the opportunities grow versus limiting yourself.
I think I'm going to jump ahead in my notes here a little bit, because you hit on something in your book. You and as a former sales manager, you had a quote that really resonated to me, and it was, "Stop playing the forecast game."
Yeah.
And I think you started down this path, so that's why I mean, for me, I'm in a world where we literally get up on Monday. We look at what we do. We forecast for the week. We roll it up by Wednesday to, various levels of management. And then on Friday, we evaluate whether or not what we said was going to happen on Monday actually happened. And then we do it all over again. And we play that game for 13 weeks, and then the world ends. And then all of a sudden, it's now the next most important quarter. I always like to say it's the most important quarter in the history of the company. Yeah. Until the next one. Until the third day of the next month of the first quarter.
Yeah.
So back to stop playing the forecast game. I mean, what do you go? Let's dig into that a little bit, if you don't mind.
I think so much of this is, it's about the art of sales versus the science of sales. There's a little bit of like intuition that you have to believe in this. So what I know about sales is, forecasting is a little bit the bane of these managers and corporations' existence. Like no one ever gets it right. You take the top of the company, the board's always asking for like, well, what can you predict? What can we rely on? And managers are always scrambling to get it right, which they push down to their sellers. Like, tell me, Ashley, what are you bringing in? And I don't care how you're bringing it in. You told me you're going to get 50,000 by the end of the week. You need to get it. And I think in some ways, even all of that's all going on, and yet I think consistently it tends to be inaccurate, and people are always looking for a better forecasting process around accuracy. So I don't know. I feel like we're working in the same system and it doesn't actually work very well. And I do think that the pressure and attention on the forecast in some way, it moves us off of what really matters, which is the customer. And so if we stop just sort of this mad, incessant focus on the numbers and started just a mad, incessant focus on the customer, I actually think things would dramatically shift the whole system, because we're talking about the system now, and start to put our intention on just making our customers wildly successful. We become successful, and sort of the money follows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now we actually just implemented something here at Apex that I got the idea from one of our clients actually, and we're using, rather than like top salesmen or like achievement-based awards, right? For staff, we're using values-based.
What does that mean?
So
more about that.
If you have, say you have like we have our core values, right? We have the courage to innovate, the resiliency to solve any problem. And we have these core values that we have attached. And so what we decided to do is give out awards, not based on performance, but on embodying courage, embodying resiliency, and taking those and saying, hey, this person embodied the core values of the business. Here's why. There you go. And because inside of my head, whenever you give somebody like you said, I don't care how you bring it in. You told me you're going to bring 50,000 in, get it done. Anytime you do something like that, it ends up forming animos relationships with your clients. And I would rather have a business that's foundationally based on, we are going to do what is best for our clients at all times, regardless of what our top line number might be. Because in the end, that long-term relationship with the client is going to be what actually keeps us alive. It's like climbing up a mountain. And if you have, a whole bunch of people that start out cheering you on as you're climbing up the mountain because you've got this fancy new piece of equipment and you're going at it and you're pushing yourself. But along the way, you're taking rocks and chucking it down at the crowd, and, they're going to stop cheering for you. And then if you slip and fall, there's no one there to catch you. But if you maintain, this is what I'm doing, and you get up to a plateau halfway up the mountain, you're like, hey guys, like, this is where I'm at. This is what I can see on the horizon. This is what we should do. This is what can help you. Then they're all still down at the bottom cheering you on. And if you slip, there's a group of people there waiting to catch you and throw you back up on the mountain again to keep climbing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I do want to say, I know you're talking about envisioning and cheering us on, and I talked about pixie dust and magic and unicorns. This is not just like magical thinking. Like, you do have to, some of our clients will say like, well, I've got a run rate. I got to keep steady, right? So we're not saying like, don't do tons of activity and keep your transactional business alive and well. Like, yeah, you've got to do all that, and you do have to pay attention to the numbers. We're not saying forget about them and it's all going to be wonderful. But there is something also about this mindset shift around customer centricity first versus forecast first that is real and will translate into more dollars.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've noticed, and I'm like you, I've been in selling, actually older than you. I've been selling for over 30 years, and I have various sales and consulting jobs, which are really just salesman. And I always say I was a salesman in sheep's clothing when I was a consultant, but because my job was, to book more business and grow my team and our practice. But I've noticed, and I think, we've all noticed, that the buying process has dramatically changed. And unfortunately, the forecast process is not that much different than it was in 1984 when I started in this business. And I don't know what the exact statistic is these days, but it's somewhere in the 80% or 60 to 70% of the buying decision has been made before they contact the salesperson. Where 30 years ago, they would call me up and say, hey, John, I see you just announced the blah, blah, blah. Come on in and I need to talk to you about it. I want to see if it fits. And so I think a lot of it is trying to map. And what I read an article or a book or something that said when the buying cycle, the buyer's process and the seller's process align, you are actually both working towards the same goal.
Yeah, that's right.
Very productive. But the problem with forecasting is most of the time the buyer's process is out of line with the seller's process.
That's right.
Because they don't understand the client or the customer.
Well, when you start forecasting, like you're trying to predict human behavior. That's why I love. I mean, John, that I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk and entire camp, right? But that's why we really take this whole day trading and attention approach, because it changes daily. Like you have to pay attention to where people are paying attention and how they're paying attention and what they're paying attention to. If you try to forecast that out too far, now you're trying to, predict, and you have to, right? In order to make prudent business decisions, you have to predict, you have to do those types of things. But if in your brain, you're not mentally flexible enough to handle a complete curveball like a global pandemic, then you need to make sure that you're inside of your head are able to make those adjustments, because the buying process has completely flipped on its head and accelerated even further now that we've experienced this, COVID.
Yeah, that's right, for sure. And I think if I'm the customer, if I come in already having done my research, I know, I've done 60% of this quote unquote buying process, I'm coming to you as a partner. I'm like, help me figure this out. Let's figure this out together. I'm not coming to you because I don't understand it. And that's, again, what's pushing us to this more co-creative stance that I think we need to move into.
I think that's really where like thought leadership, that idea of thought leadership inside of a space really came from. I mean, it started expanding because when people, like podcasting really started becoming a thing in like 2004, 2006. And there's a group of people that hopped on that train really, really early on. And now when people are looking to get into something like podcasting, they're going back and looking at like, who was in this space for this period of time? I find it hilarious now that sometimes we'll land clients because they'll get on my Facebook page and they'll go back 2 years and realize that I've been talking about the same stuff for like 2 years. And they're like, oh my God, like everybody now is just now starting to talk about this. But I just saw a post on your Facebook from 2 years ago that is like review proof almost that you're not just a bandwagon.
Yeah.
That you actually fundamentally believe this down to your core.
Yeah.
They're looking for that relationship and they can find it. That's why I think personal brand is such a powerful thing too. Wonder Woman. It's perfect example of that. Brains went to the exact same place.
So, Jan, that's a great segue into my next thing. So here's Ashley's book for those of you who are watching us on video. And as we first talked, Ashley, I bought your book. I went into Amazon to check out the actual day. I bought it back in April of 2018.
I love that.
And so, I read your book, it's a good book. I took, I can see I got little, actually, these Post-it notes are because I did what most people do. I put it on the shelf after I read it. It sat on my bookshelf. And then when you and I started chatting a few weeks ago, I pulled it back out and I started looking at it. So I obviously want to plug this book and we'll do that at the end. But I had a really, I was going through and I was like, Naked Sales, where did that title come from? And so I was just curious if there was any insight. Maybe it's just nothing, but I'm like, wow. I mean, the second part is, how design thinking reveals customer motives and drives revenue. Totally makes sense to me. But the actual title itself is I was just curious on how that came to be.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, it's funny because I took the day off yesterday to go with my significant other. He surfs and I run. So, and we were coming back and he said, damn, I left the sex wax on the car wheel. And I was like, the sex wax? And he said, yeah, it's the wax for the surfboard. And I was like, why do they call it the sex wax? And then I was like, well, why did we call it Naked Sales? Because it sells. Anyway, so first of all, it catches people's attention, but, what it refers to is this idea of like the more vulnerable and revealing we can become of ourselves in the sales process, the more we're able to authentically connect with others.
Yes.
And so that is what we're talking about in part with what we're sharing with salespeople.
Now that motion right there is the exact motion that I made at least 2 or 3 times when I watched that co-creating the buying journey video. You have some I know I sent that in the initial email, but there was the motion that happened in my living room.
Okay. Good. I like it.
Great. Now, I knew there had to be more than just a catchy title that sells books because, and I was expecting it was something along those lines because you really do, when you start really digging into people and you start, again, just even simple empathy, thinking, what do they say? What are they doing? How are they feeling? What are they saying? It really gets and if you do it, I have one of myself. I actually empathy mapped myself because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Brilliant.
And, it leaves you out there, right? And if you're doing it with the client, if you're bringing a persona, like what we do is we try to identify the key personas within our solution. We try to bring them into a room and then we decompose them. So we do the classic converge, diverge, converge, diverge, or I guess it's diverge, converged, whatever. But the double diamond.
Yeah.
And it really does open everybody's eyes up. Everybody, everybody finds out a little bit about themselves that they probably didn't even know or were willing to sort of throw out there. So it does really.
And that's why we put the orange peel coming off the orange here. That wasn't a mistake. Just to sort of reveal your inner self.
I have a question for both of you guys because y'all have held multiple sales positions and everything like that. I was raised by a salesman. I consider myself naturally gifted as a salesperson, but I'm still kind of trying to learn all of the ins and outs, right? Why do you think it's difficult for people that have been inside of the sales world for a while to accept the fact that vulnerability is a positive thing? And how could they potentially start to get over that when they're interacting with customers?
It's a great question. When we started Somersault Innovation and we started working at Salesforce initially, I remember sort of one of our coaches in the system was like, do not talk about vulnerability. Like that is not going to go down well in the sales community. I think it's gotten more traction lately because of Brene Brown and others talking more about it. But I think salespeople are also unique in that we face a lot of adversity, right? The door's getting shut on your face constantly. So there's this interesting dynamic in salespeople. Like on the one hand, we have to be sort of really resilient and tough and I'm going to, get up the next day and make another call. And I've got the number on my head and everybody knows whether I'm making it or not making it. So I have to be pretty strong in that way. But I'm also being incredibly vulnerable because I'm putting myself out there all the time. And so I think in some ways it's hard to acknowledge that vulnerability sometimes and more easy. Like I just got to keep showing up and I got to keep my shell up and I'm going to be tough and I'm all about the numbers. And so I think there's a little bit of resistance in the sense of acknowledging the vulnerability that we actually all have in being being a human being, but in sales. And I think it's, in the past, certainly as we were less educated and self-aware and therapized, vulnerability was not necessarily looked at as a good thing. It was certainly looked at more as a weakness. Whereas, I think it's we connect when we sense other people's vulnerability, right? We connect when we understand what is driving another person. That's sales right there. Right. And that's what you want. And the more vulnerable you make yourself, the more it allows another person to open up and connect with you and tell you things that they don't tell other people. And that's what you become the trusted advisor.
That is actually exactly what I was going to point to at the end, because, when I first got into this world, the coming from an ICU nursing background and, having a minor in clinical psych and trying to start a marketing firm.
Yeah.
Right. It was just hundreds and hundreds of hours of audiobooks and reading and all this other stuff. And one thing that I really found is that anytime I believe it was a book on EQ versus IQ. And it was like, anytime that you're trying to form a relationship with another person, you have to be a mirror. You have to reflect the behaviors that you want that person to reflect back to you. It's kind of like the golden rule.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you expect the customer, and you said it perfectly right there, you want the customer to tell you things that they have not told anybody else. Yeah. You have to showcase that. Yeah. You have to be willing to form a relationship with the customer that they've never had with anyone else. Yeah. And that's a very deep, that's an intimate thing. Yeah. And that's where that trust comes in. Yeah. And you start to become this person that is saying, hey, I could sell you this. Like, this is one of my favorite lines, right? I could sell you this. However, I know that with this specific thing that you need, you can get it cheaper, like right here. And I'm going to point you in this direction. Get that done here, because it'll allow me to do my job better up here. Yeah. And you can actually save money and then give me more money to do my job up here. Right. And so but the way that feels when you're having that conversation, so hopefully none of my clients listen to this, right? Because then they're going to know my tricks. But they're not tricks. That's the cool thing. Yeah. Right? It's genuinely trying to make sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck. And then when you form that long-term relationship and now they trust that you have their best intention at heart, that's a completely different ballgame. Yeah, totally agree. Completely different ballgame.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add to that one, but I think you're spot on as far as, we have to be thick-skinned, right? We have to be able to get knocked down and get back up. We have to be overly optimistic. Otherwise, we couldn't function, because most of the time we're failing, if you will.
I feel like I just made a connection. So nursing and sales, right? Two completely different ball games necessarily, right? The amount of times that you need to try to sell something to a patient is absolutely insane. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, the way that you guys are talking about this, whether it's selling a tablet that they need to take because it's going to, help save their lives, or, convincing them to get up and walk, even though they just had open heart surgery or something. You're selling constantly. But I think that the entire reason why I understand so much about what you guys are talking about is because in the nursing field, you have to sell from a place of empathy. Otherwise, it does not work at all. It doesn't. You have to go in and figure out, okay, this person has, like a cardiac ICU patient, for example. This person has 4 tubes sticking out of their chest. They just had an 11-inch incision in their sternum. It's wired together. They just freaked out because they had a heart attack 5 days ago. And I have to get them up and make them walk down a hallway, even though it's going to hurt like a son of a. And trying to sell somebody on that is not super easy. But if you sell it from a place of, hey, I know this is going to be tough. But if we don't do this, here's what could potentially happen. And if we do this, I'm going to be with you every step of the way. It's going to be scary, but I promise, like, I've got you. If you fall, we're going to catch you, and really push them to this growth that now they come back and they sit down in the chair after that walk and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better.
You're totally right.
I just, out of all the times that I've thought about nursing and everything else, like,
you didn't think you were in sales.
That connection just happened right there.
Well, people will say we're all in sales all the time. If you're a parent, like, you're trying to influence, or if you're a teacher, if you're anything, like, you're always engaging with other people and trying to negotiate, something. And sales isn't about trying to influence. I don't think always. It's trying to build a relationship where you're together figuring out what's best. And Jan, that's what you were doing. Like, this is best for the patient. You were trying to do that because you want to
lead them. You want to lead them to a positive result. I've heard a couple of different times that leadership is nothing but manipulation with positive intent. Like, if you manipulate, then you're self-serving. Because you're using the exact same tactics that a leader would use, but for self-serving purposes. And your goal is to destroy the other person so that they're subservient. But if you're a leader, your end goal is to use the exact same, mental magic to get somebody intrinsically motivated enough and inspired enough to go out and do and carry out a vision that you have for them, whether that vision is, doing their homework or walking down a hallway or purchasing a product. If you lead, it's, that's where we come back to this relationship. If you lead, that's where this relationship forms, and they trust you to be there with them along the way. That's, I think, the key piece. If they think that you're going to
they believe.
Sell them and then run away, and they're like, okay, here's this new toy, bye. Versus, hey, here's this new toy. Let me show you how to use it. Let's try to implement it in your processes. Let's figure out how this is going to bring you growth. That's where that relationship forms.
I mean, I think, I don't know if Ashley, you would agree with this, because the reality is things haven't changed, although they've really changed. But at the end of the day, people still buy from who they trust. And so building a trusting relationship is critical. The unfortunate thing today is we have to do it totally different, right? Even now, especially now with our lovely COVID problem. But even before, we have to build relationships digitally. And so it goes into my next sort of couple of things I want to talk about. This is the Disruptor segment, and you actually have a section in your book called Disruption in Illustrated, I think it's called. in the beginning. And you use one of my favorite examples, which I'll let you explain, because I'm always talking. Jan will hear me say this 1,000 times. I said, you're either being disrupted or you're the disruptor. I mean, you're either, the classic is your taxi cab industry in New York City, or your Uber or Lyft, or your, Blockbuster or your Netflix.
Exactly.
And you use a automobile example in your book. But, what's your perspective on the state of digital disruption in our technology industry, or even industry in general? As I think everybody's being disrupted, or they are the disruptor. And I always said, if they're not, they're probably going out of business, or if they don't think they are, I should say.
Well, for sure, it's disrupting sales. I mean, there's all this AI technology, as you know, that at the beginning, I was actually kind of skeptical, like, how's a computer going to come up with an email? Because it's used a lot in prospecting that actually connects with me. But if you look at some of the emails that are being generated now, there is like wired in sort of empathy in these emails in a way that I'm actually like, wow, that email felt like
processing.
What'd you say?
It said natural language AI processing.
Yeah. So I'm
super cool.
So it's impressive what it's coming up with, but I will say, so I think it's going to start replacing some of the sales process and disrupting sales in different ways. But I think that there's a myth beginning, or has already taken hold, that like sort of data analytics and AI is going to save us. And all of a sudden it's going to make it easy for us to sell. And we can just get out of the way. I can just read the analytics and then boom. And I think, that's a trap, right? Because at the end of the day, and it's actually Ginny Rometty, your former CEO at IBM, who said, at the end of the day, we're all B2P, not B2C, B2B, B2P, business to people. Like at the end of the day, it's someone who's making a decision, particularly in these complex sales. And so I don't think that human element is going away. I actually think it's becoming more important as we move to this digitalized world. So I think that we will be disrupted by all this technology, but what's going to be distinctive is how we sort of continue to humanize sales in whatever portion we become more and more involved in.
I love that
humanization.
B2P. I like that. I've actually heard that from Ginny.
Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought. But that's
she's got my brain racing too right now.
I know. No, that's cool.
I'm thinking B2P, and then there was something that you said right after the business to person. Humanizing AI. So that's something I'm extremely passionate about, right? Is this artificial intelligence and how it can enhance the ability to gather insight because of just the vast reach of data points it's able to bring in.
Yeah.
I just gave a speech not too long ago about our human-centric media model, right? And it was at the University of Akron here in Ohio. But one of the things that I said there was AI is nothing but a force multiplier. That's all it is. It's not a magic bullet. It's not pixie dust. You know, it's not a unicorn or Yoda or whatever we decide to call John for the day.
That's right. I give you a new name.
It's a force multiplier. So it still requires a highly trained human pilot. You know, in my world, in the world of the creative, what it allows us to do is allow creatives to do what they love, which is being creative. You know, if we have a photographer and a videographer that like go out and shoot our commercials for us. And so instead of spending 10 hours trying to figure out what type of commercial to shoot, what type of music to use, what other stuff, we can find all of that out using AI. And then what they do is phenomenally execute and get really, really creative with the shots, with the audio, with the music, with, you know, all this other stuff, which is what they actually love doing. So it really unlocks creativity. And it allows that person to bypass, you know, this period of time that they would have spent just mindlessly researching or brainstorming. And now they can take this data set, brainstorm for half the time, get an even better result, and really just go out and take some awesome pictures. So I'm curious, like, if that's the process in the creative world, what would that equivalent kind of be, you think, in the sales world? Like, what would AI unlock for that human pilot to be able to drive?
Well, I think like there's an organization called Databook. I think they've been around about 5 years, Silicon Valley startup. They have been really smart in terms of using AI and data analytics to start to understand not only sort of industry trends, but for a particular, let's say you're going after sort of an oil company, industry trends, but then also looking at like, what is the board asking for from this executive team? And what is this person on the executive team really accountable for in terms of goals and metrics? So they can quickly use all these analytics to synthesize for a seller what's important to John, let's say, who's the CEO of this oil company. So that is sort of in a very personalized way to the industry. Like, so that's incredible. But it still doesn't I still can't walk in there with my analytics and sort of sell you on the fact that now I actually know more than you do about you and your industry, without sort of also empathizing with what this must feel like for you and other things I've experienced about you and your customers. And I also think like the reason why this matters is because we are human beings who are wired by emotion. Like our reptilian brain and where we act first is from our emotions, right? Not from the logic. We make bad decisions all day long because we're emotional, right? And so AI and all these data analytics are never going to know, that I just had a bad morning and now I don't care what you tell me, but I'm going to make a different decision because I am emotional or because of my history or whatever it is. So again,
AI can't read body language. I mean, exactly. It can, right? But it's not going to know, this person has their ankles crossed, which means that they're still subtly holding back from a part of a conversation,
Yeah.
That's never going to be able to replace you getting face to face with a client and actually own the Les Brown quote that I use all the time is don't get what you want to say get in the way of what they need to hear.
Yeah,
sometimes you walk into a client's office, and this actually just happened last week to me. I walked in, noticed that, he was agitated while he was making coffee. So we spent the first half an hour of our consult just talking, letting him vent.
Yeah. About whatever it was.
Yeah, whatever it was. And then we, carried out. I was able to squeeze in what we needed to squeeze in that half hour. But if I would have started pushing there and been like, hey, I have this analytics sheet that tells me everything about you. Here's, I would have gotten kicked out.
Yeah,
easy.
Exactly.
Yeah, or at least it would have probably just gone right. His brain wouldn't have been focused enough. It would have just gone in, as we say, one ear out the other. I remember what I was going to mention there. I think I read a while back that in today's world, in complex enterprise sales, so that are big and complex, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 people that get involved in the process of making decisions. And so again, knowing about them, how they, know their journey. I love the way in one of the things you shared with me a while back was your version of a journey map, which
that's right.
Was what I loved about what you did was all the salespeople don't take this the wrong way, but you dummied it down. Yeah. You made it simple, which, I mean, most of us are pretty ADD, right? We have trouble focusing for more than about 5 minutes and one of the things we struggle with on the design thinking stuff is it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of focus. And now doing it virtually, it's even harder, even though we've got, in some ways, it's nice because we capture everything digitally out the get-go, but it's hard to keep people focused on Zoom or WebEx for more than, an hour and a half. And so, I think, again, my point I was going to bring up was there's a lot of people involved in these big decisions, and it's not the old days like just go call on the CIO. He'll sign this deal, and I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way anymore. Yeah, and things are so spread out across an organization as they try to compete digitally in their digital transformation.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the thing. I was like, there's. Any thoughts there or any advice to salespeople on how do you remain competitive and grow that business in that space? I mean, besides what we've already talked about.
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot of our clients are talking about the same thing. Like they're not selling to one person anymore. They're selling to a committee. And that's so much harder, right? You're having to build consensus. in a group of people, in a group of executives who may see the world very differently, in fact, right? Sales might see it very differently than marketing or operations or whoever. So, I don't know that I have any magic here, but I do think it's, again, comes down to this human element of really understanding understanding who the different stakeholders are, what do they care about. And then a lot of times we're talking about like your role as salesperson, as facilitator, right? Facilitating that dialogue, and facilitation is it's a skill. So what are the skills you need as a salesperson now to be also a great facilitator so that you can facilitate this dialogue among the group and among individuals to help you move the decision along. So I do think it's a competency that's growing in terms of necessity in the sales organizations at the enterprise level.
So yeah, I love that. Actually, it actually, first of all, it resonates because I've made a good bit of my living facilitating things. But it also, I see so many salespeople that we used to call it show up and throw up.
Yeah, exactly.
They literally just want to come in and they want to just throw up everything on the wall. I mean, and say, okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
And
here I got it.
Here I got it. And of course, that goes into this whole concept of now you're in the red ocean, right? You're swimming in the bloody red ocean with the sharks, with every other commodity salesperson.
Right.
And then when you try to upsell value, the client they don't see value. They see cost and complexity that they don't necessarily even know they need or want.
Exactly.
So anyway, Jan has got his thinking cap on.
I know, I can see it too.
And while he's doing that, I wanted to just, before we wrap up, Jan, I wanted to, and I'll let you chime in here in a second, but I don't want to run out of time. I did definitely wanted to give Ashley a plug for your Sell by Design offerings. What I noticed was you seem to be very granular. Some small things that could be very pertinent to either small organizations or entrepreneurs or startups. And then obviously growing up. So I thought you could just take a little bit of a commercial here and talk about some of the things you have to offer on your website.
Yeah, basically we work with the whole GoToMarket community. So it depends on sort of where you sit within that band. And so we have our flagship program, which you mentioned, Sell by Design. It's a 3-month process where we're giving sellers new tools, and then we're coaching them against target accounts and how to use those tools. And then we're coming back 3 months later and saying, how'd it go? What happened to pipeline? What happened to revenue? What happened to your relationships? Nice. That's phenomenal. And we do a lot of that in high tech. We then work a lot on SKOs, sales kickoff events, which are people are starting to talk about right now, and sort of customizing solutions. We've been running Microsoft's sales kickoff per 7-month process for the last couple of months, actually. And so that's a sort of a custom process depending on what's needed. And then we do a lot with either other custom opportunities outside of SKOs or working with problem-solving teams. Like we're working in a tech company with a team who's trying to rethink partner engagement. And so we're using a whole end-to-end design thinking process to help them figure out that question and come up with a new solution. So that's the variety of what we do. But we're always like trying to figure out, all we want most of all is like clients who want to co-create with us and create something sort of amazing and transformational that adds, I mean, everybody says that, but we're sort of ruthlessly focused also on adding that value because we're in sales. And we know if it's slowing down the deal cycle, if it's not adding to revenue, if it's not practical and useful, forget it.
Yeah, excellent.
So, okay, so I'm going to drop some connection, thoughts here, I guess, to finish out the episode.
Sure.
So there's a couple of different things that just kind of smacked me, like right there towards the end. When you guys were discussing the reptilian brain, how the buyer's journey has shifted, how in enterprise level solutions, it's a lot of, getting consensus rather than convincing a single person. Mm-hmm. So the reptilian brain, right? For those of you that are in the medical world that are listening to this, it's the limbic system. The limbic system is what she's referring to when she says the reptilian brain, right? So this is brainstem. This is ancient. This is very, very deep, primal emotion, anger, greed, love, lust. I mean, these are very, very deep human emotions. So every person, the beautiful thing about your strategy with design thinking is everybody, regardless of background, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of language, regardless of whatever, can relate to two things: music and storytelling. Okay. And so you have this buyer's journey, right? And we create this hero's journey that people are able to look at themselves in. And if you go back and you listen to somebody like Joseph Campbell, who gives a lot of these lectures on the art of the story, right? You start with an origin, and there's always a call to adventure. It starts. They hear something in the distance, you know, if it's Elsa, she hears, you know, in Frozen 2, she hears the call, you know, there's the Call of the Wild that was written as a classic in literature. But there's always this call to an adventure. And that's your responsibility as the salesperson, is to take this hero that is your client and give them a call to adventure. This is this new land that we can go and explore. The interesting piece is when you start to get into that call, there's always a threshold guardian. That's what Joseph Campbell would call it. There's this guardian that stands in the gate that is your guide. You know, and you see these in Disney all the time. You know, there's conflict. Parents die. There's no family members around. You know, Hercules is left alone and adopted on Earth. But then he finds this guardian that takes him through this path and guides him through all of these treacherous areas to where he can reach this place of triumph. Now, you also said that sales is a mixture of an art and a science, right? So the art piece is that relationship formation. The science piece is when you paint that journey, when you talk about the story and you empathize and you allow that person to see themselves as a hero in their own archetypal story. On the science side, it actually releases oxytocin in the limbic system and chemically forms a bond with you.
When you tell the story.
When you tell the story.
Exactly.
So it causes this emotional response, and oxytocin is one of the most powerful. That is the drug that allows women to completely forget portions of the pain of like childbirth.
I about that yesterday too. Like,
so that they can go back and have multiple kids, right? Because like any sane human would be like, I'm not doing that again.
No, thank you.
Oxytocin floods the brain and forms this inseparable bond. You know, and at this point, it's so powerful that it allows them to want to go back and have a second or third child. And inside of this sales journey, if you can get that oxytocin to release on the science side, because you are so artful with your storytelling, it forms a bond, not just intellectually, just emotionally, but chemically, neurochemically, it forms a bond. So your
100%.
process is not just, you know, pixie dust. This is legitimate science-based action.
Thank you, Jan. I'm going to take you with me. Exactly.
Aren't you glad you got on a podcast with an ICU nurse, and now we've got a little bit of a science lesson at the same time?
That's why I put my hands on my head, because I was like, holy crap.
Oh my God, that's exactly, we say that all the time. I always say, like, at the end of the day, people just want to be loved and listened to. And that's everything that then chemically happens. And it's true. One of my favorite quotes from a seller we were working with said, wait a second, you're not teaching us how to sell. You're teaching us how to fall in love with our customer. And I was like, yes.
Wow.
And when you fall in love, they love you back.
Amazing. Which is so funny, because especially in the technology space, I don't see that in very much. I see people running in and trying to explain this feature function technology mumbo jumbo and why the green connector connects to the purple one. And they try to show how smart they are. And all they're doing is making the solution ultra complex, ultra expensive, and the client's going, And it actually goes back to one of my other favorites of Simon Sinek, which is, you know, people buy from what you do, they buy why you do it, not what you do. I butchered that quote, but anyway, we're running out of time. And so the last thing I did want to just plug, of course, is your book, which of course we showed on the video, but it's in paperback. Again, it's Naked Sales, How Design Thinking Reveals Customer Motives and Drives Revenue. It's available in paperback. It's also available in Kindle. And so those of you that are Kindle Unlimited users, you could actually download it and read it for free.
Yes.
And so it's very accessible. So I don't know, Jan, we're at about the top of the hour. Anything else you wanted to say or ask Ashley before? Ashley, anything you wanted to say before we wrap this thing up?
No, I just appreciate both of you and love this type of conversation. I don't get to have it often enough. So thank you for inviting me to it.
I'd have to say that the only thing that I would ask is that this not be our last conversation.
Yeah.
That would be my only request.
I'll be back.
I will take you up on it. If you ever want me to share the stage with you, I will take you up on that offer, and we can rock some minds together.
No, I would love to do a couple of segments, either audio or video, or even on Mural or something like that.
That'd be interesting.
Where we play out a few of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, Jan and I had actually kicked that around a few months ago, as far as, doing an empathy map session.
I was going to say, or the customer journey map.
A journey map, or doing a problem rundown, or just some simple things that give people to wet their whistle a little bit on what this does. So,
Love it.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening right now and you think that would be cool, shoot us an email at info@chasetheapex.com, right? Or you can shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Y'all have all of that information. The final piece, before we actually sign off, what are your socials? Do you have socials? Are there any places that people can follow you to figure that stuff out? And then I already put up the website for somersaultinnovation.com. So
yeah, LinkedIn is where we tend to play most of the time. And, we've been making a habit of every week posting a tipper tool in video form. So it's 2 to 5 minutes long. It's Justin and I. Justin's my co-founder. And we're offering a tipper tool. And we banter back and forth a little bit. So
awesome.
Find us there.
So check them out on LinkedIn, guys. And if you want us to continue shooting segments, shoot us a message. But all right, everybody, until next time.
Yeah. This
has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to having another amazing disruptor, whatever one John is able to pull out of his Mary Poppins bag of tricks, on the next episode of The Disruptor.
All right. See ya.